No other fictional character has had such a strong and consistent influence on men around the world as James Bond. Since 1962, the actors who have played 007 have set the gold standard for masculinity, and that includes the standard for a man's physique. In today's video, we're going to look at how the body of James Bond has changed throughout the decades with different actors. We will define what the Bond body is, if there is one, and what that means for the men in the audience. Sean Connery was the first man to portray James Bond on the big screen, and to many he remains the ultimate Bond. Connery had an unusual journey in becoming Bond. As a young man, he had been a bodybuilder and a life-drawing model, and therefore had an outstanding physique. By the time he took the Bond role at 32, he was no longer in such prime condition, but at 6'2" and with a good amount of strength left over, Connery still had an imposing figure. In fact, he was so burly that it almost cost him the job, because Bond author Ian Fleming was not a fan of Connery's ox-like appearance, calling him an overgrown stuntman. During his first 6 Bond movies, Connery spent quite a lot of time with his shirt off. Now, while these scenes were not intended to show off his physique as scenes in Daniel Craig's movies would, they sent a message to the world that this is what a James Bond body looked like. Strong, slim, and very, very hairy. In fact, Connery's Bond showed his masculinity just as much with his chest hair as he did with his muscles. But let's be honest, if a 32-year-old man stepped out onto the beach today with Connery's body, he'd be unlikely to turn many heads. Although he might be seen as attractive, he wouldn't have people wondering if he were a movie star or a model. But for his time, Connery had a peak physique that certainly inspired more young men to go pick up the weights and go for a run. Next we have George Lazenby. Now, George Lazenby only appeared in one Bond movie, but continued the standard for Bond of being in good physical condition. The Australian was not an actor, but rather a model, whose hunky appearance helped land him the role. In fact, he had almost no acting experience before on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Lazenby's physique was more toned and defined than Connery's, and a little less hairy. But certainly in the mid-60s, late 60s, size for its own sake was not valued or seen as attractive like it is today. So Lazenby's body represents the pinnacle of an aesthetically pleasing male physique for its time. At 46, Roger Moore was considerably older than George Lazenby or Sean Connery had been when they stepped into the role. Moore presented a very different type of Bond, more of a debonair playboy than a cold-blooded killer. Therefore, we don't see him flaunt his physique very much, only giving us glimpses of his barrel chest when lying in bed with his latest conquest. However, what we could see was that the first Englishman to play Bond had a great body, particularly for his age. And it wasn't for want of a better physique that Moore didn't saunter around shirtless all the time. Instead, it didn't suit the more refined, sophisticated nature of his character. Now, in many ways, Timothy Dalton is the forgotten Bond, thanks to his 2 box office flops, The Living Daylights and License to Kill. His physique is also quite forgettable. There is little intimidating or sexy about his slight shoulders and overall lack of muscle tone. Now, Dalton has more of a runner's build than the body of a tough guy. I think it's interesting that in the 1980s, when Dalton's Bond movies were made, the producers weren't tempted to lean into the popularity of bodybuilder actors. At the time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren, and Sylvester Stallone had created a new archetype of masculinity that many young men were enthralled by. But the producers never found these hyper-muscled supermen to be suitable for their privately educated English spy. Instead, they recruited Dolph Lundgren as a KGB assassin in A View to Kill. Now, for many fans, Piers Brosnan remains the ultimate Bond. Tall, dark, and handsome, he made up for his lack of muscles with his wit and deep, seductive voice. Brosnan was very slender in his first movie, 1995's GoldenEye, weighing around 150 pounds on a 6'2" frame. The slim aesthetic was very popular in the 90s. You saw it with other actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Jude Law. I'd say Brosnan is the closest we've ever come to a pretty boy Bond. For 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies, the producers hired a personal trainer for the Irish actor, and he did gain some physical size over the next few years. But still, the audience had never seen a Bond who looked genuinely intimidating, like he had a license to kill with his bare hands, until in 2006, when the world met Daniel Craig. Now, when he was first announced as Bond, Craig suffered a lot of backlash. He was blonde, he was the first actor under 6 foot to ever play the character, and he had previously only appeared in weird art house movies. But when he stepped out of the ocean in that scene in Casino Royale, he won the skeptics over. Because for the first time, Bond's own body, not the body of the Bond girls, was the spectacle. His arms were by far the biggest of any Bond, his shoulders looked like they could carry tanks, and his chiseled chest was shaven, not hairy. Now with Craig, Bond's physique reached superhero levels for the first time. From what we can understand, Craig was the first Bond actor who took personal responsibility for crafting the most fear-inducing physique possible. "Look, I've got to look like I can kill somebody," Craig told an interviewer. "If I take my shirt off, it's not, oh, nice body. It's got to be, oh, fucking hell, he could do somebody. I want it to look like I could do everything that Bond does." Indeed, Craig's physique makes his contact-heavy, physically violent scenes all the more convincing. It's also helped distract from the fact that he's a bit shorter and, let's be honest, not very facially handsome. It's also worth noting that Craig stepped into the role during a time of great change in the way men's bodies were portrayed on the big screen. After the turn of the century, it became the norm for an A-list actor to have a six-pack and bulging biceps. And to this day, even actors starring in rom-coms and geeky detective shows still have top-tier physiques. It's simply become the new standard that audiences have come to expect. So, what is a Bond physique? Well, from the 6 actors that we've looked at so far, several common characteristics emerge that make up the quintessential Bond physique. First, he must be fitter than the average man. That means being slimmer and leaner. He must convincingly look like he can run a few miles and do a round of push-ups and pull-ups. For the most part, Bonds have all been tall. Aside from Daniel Craig, who's 5'10", the actors were all either 6'1" or 6'2". However, Bond must be more of an athlete than a gym bro. Even with Craig, he doesn't look like a bodybuilder or a meathead, just a man who takes working out very, very seriously. What's most misleading, however, is that every Bond has had a much better body than his on-screen diet of vodka martinis would actually create. Cheers to that. Now, while we're waiting for confirmation as to who will be the next Bond, very strong rumors have it that Aaron Taylor Johnson will step into the role of 007. If that's true, the former Avengers star may take the physicality of the character to even greater heights. He is even more chiseled than Craig. He has an 8-pack, giant shoulders, fear-inducing biceps, and it's possible that his physique may change for the role, but with society's continued love of muscle and vascularity, it's unlikely he's either going to slim down or put on a layer of fat to become 007. Now, all of this begs the question, does James Bond set a healthy body standard for men to aspire to? There's no doubt about it. It's good to be healthy and be in shape and be athletic, to work out. Now, a role model who does those things is clearly good for men to look up to. I don't want a fat Bond. I don't think even the wokest of wokies do either. Bond will always need to look physically capable and strong. However, is a six-pack, bicep veins, and shaven chest really necessary? I don't think so. Although Craig has set a new standard for the Bond body, his on-screen physique is too good for what the character would actually have. In the books, he's described as hating working out. Now, nevertheless, Bond is one of the few representations of Great Britain that we have on the global media stage, so I understand the producers wanting to give their character the most fearsome physique out there. Let me know in the comments which Bond you think had the best body and if you think having a strong physique is an important part of the character. I hope you are happy to see some Bond content back on the channel. I know I am, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.